excited about what directions we'll be going this year. Of course, 4. Is this 4? This is 4, isn't it? That's what I was wondering.
18, 19, 20.
So we'll be getting
we're starting our 4th year. That's cool.
That's very cool. That's exciting. Very exciting. Of course, we're doing it in a different medium than we have previously because of COVID. But we found that being able to record these sessions and also still being able to meet in person virtually is actually a little bit more, or adds to the flexibility of those who can participate. So we're glad for those of you who are with us live today, but we're also glad that others can join us after the fact as well. So why don't we go around the room, just briefly say your name and maybe how long you've been in a caregiving relationship, if we can do that.
Well, I'll go next, Adam. My name is Allison Brown. I have just retired from Mountain Valley Hospice. This is day 20 of retirement. And my father had Alzheimer's for about 15 years. And our journey with him is what has prompted my passion to reach out and support caregivers any way I can. And I'm glad to be here today.
So I realize you all can't see which direction. We all have different directions, we'll put it that way, on our screen. So Shannon, why don't you go next for us?
Good morning. Good afternoon. I am Shannon Holland. I am with Home Instead Senior Care and on the steering committee. And I am also, from a personal level, helping advise my dad, who is transitioning to the caregiving role with my mom.
Thank you. Kelly, how about you?
Hey, Kelly Sloan. I am with Davie County Senior Services, and I am the coordinator of all the service programs here for Davie and the seniors. So the Family Caregiver Support Program is one of the more relevant ones for this group.
Excellent. That appears to be our steering committee, unless Angela joins in a few moments. So we'll just go through the ones who are with us as well. Lash, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'll be happy to. I'm Lash Sanford. I'm in Knoxville, and I am grateful for the opportunity to be with y'all. I look after Sarette, my wife. We've just had in December, our 59th anniversary. She's put up with me for a long time, but she began to have some struggles starting in 2008. And it really seemed to be very minimal at that point. We felt like we had sort of dodged a bullet, and she was doing pretty well. Unfortunately, things have sort of taken a turn downhill a bit since then, and starting about 15, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, it became apparent that I was going to need to be becoming more adept at caregiving than I had become before. I had dealt some with my mother, and that's our story. We're hanging in there, and good to be with you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Suzanne, how about you going next for us?
Well, I haven't been able to attend very much, but I have really learned a lot from the few times I've been. My husband became very, very, very sick a couple of years ago, about a little less than 2 years ago, and wasn't expected to live, but he proved a lot of people wrong. So we're still caregiving right along.
Okay.
Right now, he is an inpatient. He suffered COVID and a gallbladder infection.
Oh, no.
He was supposed to have been discharged yesterday and today, but the labs keep coming back. No, you can't go home today. So he's on a hold pattern. Today is his birthday. So, and this remote caregiving is really weird.
Yeah.
All I got's a telephone. So
Yeah.
it's weird.
Well, we're glad you're with us. You'll certainly be in our thoughts as you continue your caregiving in this strange new way of doing it right now. Too.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Certainly. Lynn, I have you next on our list.
Okay, I'm Lynn. I am caregiver for my husband. He was diagnosed with mixed dementia about 4 years ago. Live in Winston-Salem. And I'll probably be in and out on this. I don't know that I'm going to be able to sit for the whole, be able to be in front of the screen for the whole thing.
No worries at all. No worries at all. Thanks for being here with us. And Kevin, have you last but not least?
Hello. It's been a while since I've joined in. I was kind of, I'll turn on my video for a moment. You can see the view that my office gets as I sit on the couch, you know, with my pillow on one side and my blankie on the other, you know,
Yes.
working from home. So I've missed several over the summer, and other than that, had a scare, had a possible exposure, didn't feel that good. COVID test came back negative, so that was always good. It was one of those asymptomatic type things, other than like Monday. So stayed away from everybody. Didn't go to church last Sunday. Found out in the afternoon that was negative. So now I can actually go see my dad again. He's 85, and that just kind of plowing along with the summer stuff or projects.
Okay. I'm glad you're with us.
Yeah, glad I could. I was actually late talking to a coworker, so I joined in a couple of minutes late. So thanks for keep sending me the invites. I appreciate that.
Certainly.
I will add, I'm glad to see you back, Kevin, because you were also our audiovisual advisor on the side, whether you liked it or not, way back when.
Yeah, no, I've been wanting to join in. I was out of town back in July, and I don't know if I even saw anything for August or another month, and saw the invite yesterday, and I was like, oh, that's a good topic. I definitely want to hear that today. So I'll be muting and video muting so I can eat lunch.
Perfect.
Okay.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you all for introducing yourselves. Just one other quick word before turning it over, that we will have our schedule for the next year should be out soon. I don't have an update on that as of this morning, but I'm hoping we'll be able to distribute that by email, hopefully before our next session. So anyway, all right. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Allison to lead us this morning.
Yep.
Afternoon.
I know it feels like morning, doesn't it?
It does.
So Kevin, you noticed I scooted over to cover my light there real quickly. For those of y'all that don't know, it's a faux pas of these types of meetings to have a lot of light glaring in on everybody. So I'm going to try to stay centered, but I'm about to share my screen. We're going to just proceed and talk about this topic of advanced care planning, advanced directives. And let me see.
Allison, while you're sharing your screen, if anyone has comments that you want to type, I'll be watching the chat box as well, just so Allison can focus on the presentation.
Uh-oh. It says my
Okay, that's going to be a problem. Okay, I will talk to her. Okay, all right. I think she disconnected herself.
I think she just came back. Maybe.
Here, okay, she's trying.
Okay, it says my screen share is paused.
On my end, it says Allison Brown has started screen sharing. You are viewing Allison Brown's screen.
What are y'all seeing?
Just a blank screen.
Not being a Zoom person, would you have to select which screen to share?
Yeah, and I am. Let's see, share sound. What it's doing is throwing me back to the join a meeting. Boy.
They can remind her that they cannot give this to her.
Allison, what if you exit out of that one, out of that join meeting page?
Yeah. Well, it says leave the meeting or cancel. That's what I had to do before when I left. Well, I can just talk about this.
I think she X'd herself out again.
Sure. And how about if she refuses? If she says,
All right, I'm back now. Let's see, I've got it open.
okay.
Let me try it one more time, and if it doesn't work, did that work that time? Yay! All right, so from the beginning. Okay, are y'all seeing the whole thing? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so advanced care planning in my mind is it's an overarching concept that is completely tied to time, and it gets confused with end of life planning. So I thought I would try to kind of clarify that for us. Okay, so when we're talking about advanced directives, which are documents we will discuss here in a minute, there are documents that are in effect while you are still alive, and there are documents that go into effect after you are no longer alive, upon your death. And hopefully all of us, while we are alive, we will be mentally competent for that entire period that we're alive. So that's why I made those two the same green color. But for some of us, unfortunately, we may face a season of time toward the end of our lives when we are not competent. Now, who knows what I mean when I talk about mentally competent? What does that mean to you? Anybody?
Dementia?
That's one way that yes, absolutely, dementia. And let me remind y'all, if you want to answer, you need to unmute yourselves on your little microphone icon. Dementia is one thing. What about having a debilitating stroke? That affects your cognitive function and your physical functioning. What about if you're intubated? You've got a tube down your throat and you're so sick that machines are having to breathe for you, your brain, you may still be very, you're all there, but your ability to communicate is going to appear that, you know, you're not mentally competent. So while you are alive and competent, the first block here is talking about documents that you need to put in effect, that will, I mean, documents that are that will come into effect upon your death. Okay. And the first one of those is your last will and testament. And I happen to have mine right here, or I did in this stack here. Where did I put it? I keep it in a file. Isn't that original? It says will info. And it's kind of beaten up, but it normally lives in a fireproof safe in our basement. Which, is that a good place for it to be? Does anybody know? No, it's not. I should have it submitted at the clerk of court so that it, you know, it would be really, really safe. I can keep a copy of it here at the house, but I really need to take this up to the clerk of court office to have it stored there. Any trusts and estate planning, and we're going to touch on that a little bit, because most of us normal everyday people, we don't think we have enough assets to warrant needing a trust or an estate, but it's because we don't understand what those words really mean. If you're alive and have any kind of property, you have an estate. It's going to be called your estate upon your death. Another thing that needs to be documented are all your beneficiary designations. Anybody that's supposed to receive any of your assets upon your death, that needs to be documented. Your property deeds, while you are still competent, you need to set up your bank accounts with co-signers, and there's a certain way that you do that so that it's survivable, so that their ownership of the bank account survives your death. It's with rights of survivorship. And I gave this talk a couple of years ago, and I had a young man in the audience. Daniel was in his early 30s, and he told me about this book. Do y'all see it? I'm Dead, Now What? Which just took, you know, that threw me back a couple of notches. But it is essentially an inventory book of all these things that I just mentioned, of documenting them. And when you open the very first page, it says, Survivors. This book is intended to help you navigate more smoothly through the particulars of my life. You may wish to start with the at the time of my passing page in section 19. So it's a really good repository, you know, for putting everything in there, and put it very visible. And in it, you record the location of all your important papers, you know, that may or may not be filed at the courthouse or down in the fireproof safe, and nobody knows the combination to it. And then while you are competent, and this second block on the screen is actually the main thing that we're talking about today, is to establish the legal documents that are effective while you're still alive. And, you know, those are called advance directives, meaning I'm making these decisions before the events happen, so they're in advance. And these are my directives. These are my choices. These are the way, this is the way that I want things to go, because my health and my illness, they're about me. They're about how I want them handled. And my death, as much as possible, you know, I want it to be on my terms, to the extent that death can ever be on someone's terms. So one of the first two most important documents are your financial power of attorney and your healthcare power of attorney. Now, North Carolina calls these roles power of attorney. It doesn't have anything to do with an attorney. Okay, here's in my will info folder, my healthcare power of attorney page. Can y'all see that? Healthcare power of attorney. My husband is my designated healthcare power of attorney. And
Excuse me, Allison.
yes,
We're still seeing your screen. Maybe you can show us the book after you finish the PowerPoint.
oh, you are right. Yeah, I'm afraid to hide the, yeah, I'm just showing y'all these documents because I can see myself in my window. I'm sorry about that. But I want you to see that, gosh, I wonder if I should risk it. Because I can see Shannon sitting there going, I don't know.
Well, I've turned off my
But thanks for
little
telling
window.
me that, because I won't waste our time then with showing y'all with a little bit of show and tell, like you said, until at the end. So these are just documents that if you go to the hospital, they have a version of a healthcare power of attorney. If you go to your doctor's office, they may have a version of it. If you go online, you will find the North Carolina standard format. And then there are a lot of workbooks out there that have been vetted by legal people that do the same thing. Your financial power of attorney is also called your durable power of attorney. And then your healthcare power of attorney governs your medical decisions. So what those are doing is it's you saying, this is the person I want to make decisions for me if I can no longer make them myself. Due to what, we talked about a few minutes ago, coma, dementia, in anything that affects your cognitive function and renders you no longer competent to make your own decisions. Are there any questions about that? I always thought that I had to go hire an attorney and I might not be able to afford it. And it was one of those things that I didn't tackle head on until I had a little bit of education about it. They have to be signed by witnesses, and your healthcare power of attorney does need to be notarized. But you don't have to have a lawyer to implement either one of these. They are simply saying, this is the person I want to be in charge of those decisions. And real quickly, I'm not going to talk about your financial power of attorney. But your healthcare power of attorney, when you designate them, you are giving them the authority to make choices for your medical care, like tests, prescriptions, surgeries. They have the authority to decide, we want to do further tests to find out what the problem is, or, gee, grandma's 96, it looks like metastatic cancer, let's just be comfortable. This person is the one that's going to make those choices. They also are going to interpret on your behalf. And that's why it's so important that you sit down with them and talk to them and look them in the eyeballs and say, this is what I want and this is what I don't want. And if something were to come up that we've never talked about, based on what I am expressing to you, I would expect you to, I have confidence in you to make the right decisions for me. Okay. They have the authority to put you in assisted living or nursing home. They have the authority to call hospice. They have the authority to begin life preserving treatments or to end life-sustaining measures. They have the authority to look at your medical records. They have the authority to move you out of state to another state to get the care that they may want for you. They have the authority to refuse medications on your behalf. Well, grandma she wouldn't even take an aspirin. I don't know about that morphine. We're not going to give her that morphine. Well, so you need to sit down and have a really heart-to-heart talk with this person and let them know, if I'm at the end of my life, I don't want to be in pain. I don't want y'all to see me in pain. They have the authority to apply for Medicare, Medicaid, or other insurance benefits for you. And there's the list goes on. And these are actually spelled out within the body of the document, the papers that you have. The living will. The living will is your choice for the kind of medical treatment that you want or you don't want. So for example, it's mostly about life support. Life support treatment means any medical procedure, device, or medication to keep me alive. It includes medical devices put in me to help me breathe, food and water supplied by a medical device, even like tube feeding. It includes cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR, major surgery, blood transfusions, dialysis, antibiotics, and anything else that's meant to keep you alive. And most of the wording of a living will kind of goes like this. If my doctor and another healthcare professional both decide that I am likely to die within a short period of time and life support treatment would only delay the moment of my death, I want to have life support. I do not want to have life support. And if it's already started, I want it stopped. Or I want to have life support treatment if my doctor believes it could help. But if my doctor but I want my doctor to stop giving me life support treatment if it's not helping my health condition or my symptoms. And you can spell out, I want this if I'm close to death. I want that if I'm in a coma. If I have severe and permanent brain damage. I'm going to add a statement in mine if I have Alzheimer's. If I get to the point that I don't know you, I don't know my husband, I don't know my family, that pneumonia that I get, that might be God's way of taking me on home. So your living will is extremely important, but we'll talk in a little while. It can be very difficult to get people to talk about with you. Living trusts are ways that you can protect your assets while you're still alive, you're still competent. Let's say you're a second marriage and you've both got sets of kids from prior marriages. You really need to pin down who's going to get what, because you don't want it to get ugly after you're gone. The do not resuscitate form, we'll talk about that when I get to show and tell time. And the most form, the medical orders for scope of treatment. Those are all part of advance directives documents. And every state in the nation recognizes the authority, and in the case of a financial power of attorney or a healthcare power of attorney, the legal binding of those designations on your behalf. So if you don't have those, we need to get them. So once you become incompetent, the advance directives go into effect, and your healthcare power of attorney is now front and center in charge of your healthcare decisions. So as we already mentioned, stroke, dementia, coma, intubation, these can result in incompetence. So if you don't have a designated power of attorney, you can end up falling under state guardianship, or alternately, Your family might have to go through the courts to gain guardianship over you just to be able to make basic decisions. So don't wait. And another thing is that these, your healthcare power of attorney form should have a place for you to designate like a first choice, a second choice, and a third choice. Always have a backup person, a number two. You know, my husband is my healthcare power of attorney, but what if he and I, were to die in a car crash together? Then everything's up in the air. So my poor brother, bless his heart, he's my number two healthcare power of attorney. And I've talked to him about that, and he knows what my preferences would be. All right. So I wanted to clarify this a little bit with you folks, even though this isn't really what we're here to talk about today, but simply because I was confused about it. So I assume everybody else might be confused about it if I am. So with your last will and testament, if you have one upon your death, that's called testate. And as I mentioned earlier, it's better if that will has already been filed with the clerk of court, but upon your death, it definitely should be submitted for probate. And the county clerk's office will open that estate, and they will help ensure that everything happens the way it's supposed to. If you die without a will, or if your loved one dies without a will, North Carolina statutes will decide how your property is going to be distributed. And while they're doing it, they're going to take anywhere from 1% to 6% of the fair market value of those assets. And it's going to take up to 2 years, 9 months minimum. So at the best, a year, and and in the normal cases, it's 2 years. So your property and your assets would be tied up, for that long. And if you had wanted your family to receive things, when I'm out driving around the countryside, I see these cute little homes, and over the months, I watch them get grown up and, kind of go into disrepair. And I think, I bet that little place is tied up in court. I bet somebody didn't have a will. So just so you'll know this, it's important to have a will. And you can go on Google and download a North Carolina approved will. You can go to LegalZoom and get a approved will. So somewhere in between, us being healthy, young, older adults or young adults, and the end of our lives, most of us are probably going to need some kind of long-term care. Lash mentioned he's been taking care of his wife a long time. Our caregiver friend Vince, the last time he was with us, shared, I believe he said he had been taking care of his wife for 17 years with dementia. So when we're looking at trying to look into the future with a crystal ball, and we don't really know those answers, it is so important to talk about our choices and our preferences, to understand what kind of insurance coverage is at play, and to understand different costs of care. So I want to scare you with this next slide. That is an average of, let's see, y'all, hold on here a minute. There we go. Of what the costs are if you need home care. Shannon, I don't know if $1,850 is about the going rate for a home instead home care person, but if you annualize that in the bottom box down there, it's roughly $108,000 a year if you had them 16 hours a day. I was trying to make it apples to apples because, assisted living and skilled nursing, that you're there all day. A home health aide is a little more expensive, up to about 115,000 a year. Adult daycare is about $55 a day, but unfortunately, we don't have adult daycare everywhere. And then assisted living is about $44,000 a year, and skilled nursing is about $74,000 a year with these average monthly rates. And this is taken across the board in North Carolina. It varies greatly depending on each individual facility. So planning is so important. And now I want to stop sharing my screen, and maybe we'll go back to that and let me catch you up. So one of the things I was show and telling on you was my little file folder right here that says will info. Can y'all see that? Can y'all see me now? Okay. And let me back my screen up a little bit. I just wanted you to see, you know, my will is just a paper document. You know, it's got all the little legal stuff up at the top of the margins. And then part of my will, after a few pages, is my healthcare power of attorney. And we did them all at the same time. You know, and it just looks like that. It's not anything fancy, anything special. Let me put that back where it goes. There are other healthcare power of attorney documents out there. One of them is called the 5 Wishes, and it is used nationally, and it is in booklet form. And I really like this booklet. It's been vetted by attorneys all over the United States. It was developed by a man that worked with Mother Teresa when she was in New York City. And it tells you what states it applies in. I don't know if y'all can see that or not. And it's in North Carolina. And then it's written in normal everyday language. So wish number 1 is actually the healthcare power of attorney document. And then wish number 2 is actually the living will document. You know, and it has all these places that you write in it. You check the boxes, you can mark it out, you can take notes in it. See these lines down here? And then it also has wish number 3, my wish for how comfortable I want to be. Wish number 4, my wish for how I want people to treat me. And wish number 5 is my wish for what I want my loved ones to know. I wish to have my family and friends know that I love them. I wish to be forgiven. I wish for everyone to know I forgive them. Anyway, this booklet and others like it is a fantastic conversation starter. Because how many of you have tried to have this conversation with your loved one or the person you're trying to find out what do they want? Well, I don't want to talk about that right now. I don't want to talk about that. How often does that happen? Does that happen a lot for you? All right, I'm getting the gallery on here where I can see everybody.
No, my mother did this a long time ago, so she already had her obituary written out.
And what a gift that was. My dad eased into his Alzheimer's. I mean, for months, almost a year, we didn't know what was going on with him. We just thought he was trying to pull one over on us all the time. And he, you know, he might not have truly been competent when his wife, my stepmother, is a wonderful woman, when she actually got the healthcare power of attorney document signed, but none of us said a word because we knew how important that was for her to be his legal representative as he, you know, faded into Alzheimer's. But we never were able to have a conversation with him about what he would have liked or what he would have wanted. And it was a real difficult time. When he died, there were no more assets because she had to spend down everything to cover the costs of his long-term care to qualify for Medicaid. And the rules were a lot stricter back then than they are now. So it's, I can tell you stories about it, but I'm in the interest of time, I'm not going to. It's just so important to have these conversations and to get these documents in place. So here's the other book I was showing you that, like I said, I was taken aback when I saw this, but if y'all have your cameras on, you'll be able to see it says, "I'm dead, now what?" And it's a binder with tabs in it and places for you to record and write everything. And I'm already sitting there thinking, y'all can see mine's blank. I haven't really I've got stuff stuck in it, but I haven't written in it because I'll start writing and I'll think, but what if that changes? I need to write this in pencil so I can erase it. I'm thinking about it. So I don't want to mess up the book. But a book like this would be a living, breathing document that, would be something that you could keep in a place and give those instructions. Another really important resource is this little book. It's called For Talk, and it's about how to have these conversations. And I will tell you, it's written by a pastor. He's also a financial professional, an author, and a speaker. And it's written from a very Christian perspective, which is, lovely for many of us. But the concepts are just foundational. And he talks about 7 questions. So you had the 5 wishes in that one document. So now we got the 7 critical conversations. 7 critical conversations. The first critical conversation is, do we have a proper will and is it up to date? The second critical conversation is, are we prepared if we are hospitalized? The third is, who do we trust with our finances? The fourth is, have we selected a wise attorney? And there's a whole paragraph, a whole couple of pages in here on who needs to hire an attorney and why. Because like I was saying earlier, I think most of us, just normal people, we think, I don't own enough to need an attorney. But if you want to protect what you do have, you need an attorney, and it's not that expensive. I think the elder lawyer that I've been talking with charges a flat fee of about $500 for just the basics, to meet with them and get everything lined up. And that includes any trust planning, setting up a living trust and going through, and then you go from there. And I think $500 to help keep my children and my stepchildren and my grandsons and my grandchildren, to help them not have to do what I had to do. I had to pick out my father's clothes for his funeral. I had to go buy him a pair of shoes, and to have all these decisions already made and have everything in place so that they can focus on their own hearts and not have to be. Then the 5th critical conversation is, how can we make a personal final statement? And I like thinking about that. How can I make a personal final statement? Or how could I make my father's personal final statement? The 6th conversation is, do we have the right kind of insurance? For a lot of us, it's too late really to get long-term care insurance. it's astronomical after a certain age. But those of you that are younger, I have it. I got it when I was 50, when Dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And I'm thinking, if this is genetic and this is the way I'm headed, I want to protect my family from what we went through with, Dad losing everything. The seventh conversation: does our legacy demonstrate what matters most? Does my legacy, what I'm leaving, does it demonstrate what really matters most to me? And when I think about that, I think, am I talking the talk, or am I going to walk the walk? By anticipating my death and making sure, like I said when we opened, that it is as much on my terms as possible, so that my life has had an impact, and then my death is going to bring that closure to that impact, and it's going to be good. It's going to be what I leave, and I want that to be very, very positive. We talked about the DNR form, the do not resuscitate. So I was showing it to you back when I had my PowerPoint up on my screen. So let me show you what this looks like. In the state of North Carolina, the state calls this the goldenrod form. This is the color of the paper is goldenrod. And do not resuscitate orders. It has to be signed by a doctor. So you can't just go get one of these anywhere and you fill it out. Your doctor has to fill it out. And I recommend to people to, while you've got him, ask your doctor to give you 3 or 4 copies. 3 or 4 originals, 3 or 4 goldenrod, because if you have a heart scare like I had a few weeks ago, and EMS comes to your house, and if they see a copy of this, they are obligated to try to save your life. So when does this document come into effect? Y'all are all muted. If my heart stops beating, number 1, and I'm no longer breathing, then that's when I would need resuscitation. And this is saying, do not resuscitate me. So if my heart stops beating and I am no longer breathing, what am I? Well, after just a very few minutes, I'm dead, really. And what we've learned, thank you, Adam, is that we can mechanically pump from the outside that heart, and a whole lot of times we can get somebody, we can get them back, as we say. But TV has really glamorized what CPR actually looks like. I think I read a statistic where I think it's 82% of the CPRs that you see performed on television, the person just jumps right up and you see them in the next frame and they are fine. But let me explain to you that the older and more frail our bones become, the more damaging CPR is, because they basically have to break your sternum a lot of times to get deep enough into your body to massage that heart and get the heartbeat back. It's very, very painful. If your brain has gone without oxygen more than 20 minutes or 30 minutes, there's a high probability of serious cognitive damage as a result. And the older we are, the less easily we will recover and come back from CPR. So it's up to each of us to think about. Now, I'm 61. I'm still in pretty good health. I don't want a DNR yet. I would want them to try, but as I age, I will put one into place. And especially if I develop Alzheimer's or COPD or some type of disease that really, really impacts my quality of life. Do you want to be a burden? You know, most of us, we don't want to be a burden. Although I did have a friend one time, her dad was very sick, and he ultimately died of his he had Parkinson's and dementia and some other things going on. And I asked her one time, I said, do you think you're, oh, well, let me back up. So she was spending all of her time at her mama's house helping her mother with her daddy, and her husband was, you know, he wasn't horrible about it. He wanted her to be there and help, but he was feeling very left out and neglected. And I asked her, would your daddy really want you to put your life on hold, basically, to, you know, to help your mom take care of him? And she thought about it, and she said, yes, he would definitely expect that. So we have to understand these expectations and understand, you know, who or what we might be disappointing. Another form I want to show you is called the MOST form. And it is always, in North Carolina, it is always this hot pink form. And this one is two-sided. And again, you don't just, you know, download these. They have to come through a healthcare professional. And the MOST form is widely used when a person is in a long-term care setting. So especially if you go to a nursing home, if you're sick enough to need to be at a nursing home, they would make sure that you had a MOST form, and the doctor assigned to that nursing home would sign it. And it basically takes the place of a DNR form, because the very first section A on here says cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR, the person has no pulse and is not breathing. Attempt resuscitation, do not attempt resuscitation. So that one little section right there covers this whole yellow piece of paper. The next section is medical interventions. If the person has no pulse and is not breathing, do you want the full scope of treatment? Use intubation, advanced airway interventions, mechanical ventilation, cardioversion as indicated, medical treatment, IV fluids, etc., and transfer to the hospital. Do you want limited intervention, or do you want comfort measures only? Keep me clean, warm, and dry. Use medication by any route, positioning, wound care, and other measures to relieve pain and suffering. Use oxygen suction and manual treatment of airway obstruction as needed for comfort. Do not transfer to the hospital unless comfort cannot be met in the current location. It also talks about antibiotics, because, you know, I would automatically think, well, antibiotics are going to preserve life, right? You know, I would need to think about, do I want to be on antibiotics? But in the case of, say, a urinary tract infection that is very, very painful, antibiotics are palliative. They are going to help with that pain. So you have a choice here, you know, antibiotics if life can be prolonged, antibiotics if an infection occurs. And I'll tell you, hospice allows the use of antibiotics for palliation, to make somebody comfortable. Section D on the MOST form talks about medically administered fluids and nutrition. You know, do you want a feeding tube? Do you not want a feeding tube? People are so worried about starving grandma to death, or myself starving to death. You know, food is just such a pleasure. Well, foodies might, like me, think that. And when I have this conversation with people, I talk about when a baby is born. When, you know, some of you know this, when a baby is immediately born, do they want to eat? No, they're busy looking around, or they're sleeping, or they're they're squirming, they're trying to figure out, everything just changed. And a lot of times a baby won't suckle for a day. And all those grandmas were telling you, get that baby on the breast, get that baby a bottle. Like just frantically, we got to get this baby to eat. But that whole, esophagus, intestine, stomach connection thing, it doesn't start working for a few days and the baby is fine. And then, that baby grows a tooth and they're in diapers and they get a tooth and we start feeding them harder food and they learn to walk and talk and then they won't shut up. And then, we live our big, beautiful lives. And then at the end of our lives, the opposite happens. We go back into diapers, some of us. We used to lose our teeth. I remember my granddaddy used to say, I got almost all of my teeth. And he was so proud of his teeth. Our generation, we don't get that. Everybody has nice teeth now. And then at the very, very end of life, as your body's systems are shutting down, your body has an inner wisdom and it knows. And to ingest a lot of fluids is not good. It's going to put a burden on that weakened heart and those weakened lungs that they cannot handle. You're going to have fluid build up in the lungs and build up in your abdomen that make you very uncomfortable. They're very painful right at the end. Food is love, but at the very end of life, as your systems, your very body systems are shutting down, you don't need food. You don't need food. So I like this form because it's going to require us to have these conversations and to understand, do I want a feeding tube? Do I want a tube down my throat to feed me? Do I want a permanent tube sticking out of the side of my body to feed me? How long is that going to go on? And then one of my favorite sections on the most form is the very last one because it says discussed and agreed to by. And then it's got about 10 check boxes. The patient, the parent or guardian if they're a minor, the healthcare agent, the legal guardian, the attorney in fact, the spouse, the majority of their reasonably available parents and adult children, the majority of their reasonably available adult siblings, or an individual with an established relationship with the patient. So it accommodates, all the folks that might want to be at the table for these conversations and these decisions. And then the back of it is, just directions for completing it. But here at the bottom, it has a place where it can be changed. So as my illness progresses and I get sicker and sicker, we might strike through some of these. We might change them from, take me to the hospital to no, don't take me to the hospital. So the most form, I tried to get a most form and my doctor said, well, this was 10 or 15 years ago. I wanted a most form. And he said, you're way too young for a most form. And I said, do you remember Terry Schiavo? How many of you remember the young lady in Florida who was in a coma, lying in a hospital bed for 15 years while her husband and her mother fought through the courts over, what to do with her? And that one's really tricky. We have the privilege of reading stories often about people that have been in comas and they miraculously wake up, a year later, 4 years later, 5 years later. And I'm always sitting there thinking, I would have pulled the plug by now and they would have never had a chance to wake up. And how would I feel about that? And that's, that's part of the burden of these decisions. But I think for most of us, by and large, that lingering would not be what we would want. And imagine the medical bills and but that's something that you get to decide. I had a gentleman one time, I was going through the 5 wishes with him. And y'all, when we got to the part on the living will, where, you know, I'm either in a coma and not expected to wake up, or I have permanent and severe brain damage and I'm not expected to recover. There's a place down here at the bottom where you can write. And he had me write that he wanted to be on life support for 14 days. He wanted a team of 3 doctors, not 2, which is state law. He wanted 3 doctors on the 14th day to decide, you know, if he had a chance of making it or not. And if they felt like he did not, then on the 15th day, he wanted life support removed. And I had to draft it up on a piece of notebook paper, and then we edited it a little bit, and then I wrote it in his book, and then, you know, I initialed by A.T. Brown so that his family or legal folks would understand that it had been written at his dictation. So I know we're at time. Do any of you have any questions about what we've discussed?
I have a question.
Hi, Kevin.
Hello. At one time, the DNR forms were only valid for 1 year, then they had to be redone. Is that still the case?
Nope. Nope, they're still good. They are,
my mother-in-law had one, and at the bottom it said it expired after 1 year.
yeah, no,
That was a while ago.
yeah, no, and I think that got to be a problem. You know, you hear all these horror stories, Kevin. I was giving this talk in Wilkes County 2 years ago, and I didn't know it at the time, but I had an EMT in the audience, and he told me a terrible story about a situation where a gentleman in his 90s was under hospice care, and there was one of these on the refrigerator, and there was one of these in a sleeve just like this, pinned at the headboard of the bed that the man was in. Well, he had fallen out of bed, and he had no pulse and was not breathing. So when they got there, he said, well, ma'am, there's the DNR, and he is not breathing and has no pulse, and he was asking her, do you want us to put him back up on the bed? Can we help you call the funeral home or whatever? And the wife ran over to the sleeve and pulled the form out and shredded it up and said, no, I don't want any of that. You get to work and do your job and bring him back. And he said 30 minutes later, they still had not brought him back, but they had broken every rib in his chest cavity. And it was just, it was terrible. So, like I told you before, EMS is ethically, and they are charged by state statute in North Carolina to initiate CPR if there is not one of these present. So, and I imagine, Kevin, situations like yours might be why there's not an expiration date on them now. But, if your circumstances did change, you might want to tear one up that you might have had in place.
This was 20 years ago too, so.
Yeah. That's a good question. Thank you for bringing that up. This is the book For Talk. Have I shown y'all that already? I did, didn't I? That had the 7 conversations in it that I wanted y'all to see. An attorney recommended this book, and I have really enjoyed that book, and it's got really good ideas for how to talk it talks about using like the death of a celebrity or the anniversary of the death of someone, or use life circumstances to initiate those conversations, and don't give up, because they're some of the most important conversations. We plan for 9 months for that baby to get here, and we need to plan as lovingly and diligently for those last 9 months when they're on their way as well. I want to close with a couple of observations with y'all. Medicare is not going to pay for a nursing home. Okay? Medicare will pay for someone to go to a nursing home for rehab for up to 100 days, as long as they meet different criteria at different milestone points during that. And many of us are not going to qualify for Medicaid. North Carolina hasn't expanded it, and my husband's mother has developed Alzheimer's. She worked at Reynolds, so she has a good retirement, and it is just enough that she makes too much money to qualify for Medicaid, but it's not enough money every month to pay the full bill at a nursing home. And so she's currently in assisted living, and that facility is bending over backwards to keep her there, because she's becoming what they call total care, which is when you're incontinent of bowel and bladder. You may get to the point that you can't really feed yourself. And so we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. I mean, I'm right there with you in figuring these things out. Are there any other questions? Well, if you do, if you think of any that you might have after we're signed off and the recording is stopped, you have my email address from the email notices that I send out, and Shannon's contact information as well. And we will be happy to talk with you, anybody on the steering committee, and help guide you through these processes and through understanding your advance directives. So if anybody doesn't have any further comments.
Allison,
your time.
I want to thank you for this program. I think it's very informative and very enlightening and very thought-provoking for me. And I just appreciate all the effort that's gone into it and the way you presented it. The only thing is, I wish to goodness I could now get it to my 2 daughters, so that, and I'm a dinosaur when it comes to things with electronic things, particularly the new world. I think I'm very much stuck in the older world sometimes. But anyway, it's a good program, and I really appreciate you putting it on for us. Thank you.
You're welcome, Lash. And look at you. You got your video and your audio turned on your smartphone. You are not a dinosaur, my friend.
Well, I'm doing all right.
You're
For a
doing
guy
great.
that doesn't, I have no computer, so I have to do it all on the phone, which, is a self-inflicted wound, I think. But but anyway, it's a really good thing, and I may be giving you a call at some point to see if you can maybe help me get a copy of it to my daughters, because I think I have one of them that's a lawyer. I tried to do better, but she became a lawyer anyway, and I've got another one that's here in the state. And anyway,
Okay.
maybe you can help me a bit.
You
But
reach
thank you
out.
very much for the program.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And we are officially signing off Caregiver Academy Online, January 20th, 2021. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
See you all.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.